to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior, and I'm excited to have on the line with me today Mr. Peter Scott. Hey, Peter, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, man, it's great. I mean, there's a lot to our background. I want to tell everybody how we met in a moment, but, you know, this show is all about you. As I said to you, we get leaders and business people on. I always say, check your ego at the door. You're a very humble guy. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Peter.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in England and very much a nerd. Mathematics, science, and what I didn't know at the time, Asperger's syndrome, because it hadn't been invented then, so the word they used was weird, and all of the things that go along with that. This was before it was cool to be a nerd, because people realized you could make money with it, but that didn't happen until .com. So that was, you can imagine that kind of childhood. I went to Cambridge and studied computer science there. And then I really liked the space and astronomy business. So I went to work for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. And I started out in the navigation section. And you might have heard stories about spacecraft being navigated like as though you hit a golf ball in Vancouver and got a hole in one in Boston. And that was a group that did that.
Wow.
And
well, that's amazing. Well, already my head's going in so many directions, and I'm already having this vision of a movie and that we'll produce together called Nerds in Space. Because, you know, every time you said something, I went, am I talking to myself? I mean, I was born in the UK. I was a nerd in school. In fact, my wife Anna, we joke about it. She was the jock. And I was a guy who was head down into my studies. And I said to her, I said, if I was in high school, you never would have married me, because all the girls who rejected me. I got a funny story about my high school reunion. I'll tell you if it comes up in the discussion. But anyway, it's an honor to have you on, Peter. I want to tell everybody how we met. Everyone, we met. Peter and I met in an incredible place. If I was to say to you, we met on a round circle, 8-foot diameter, the color red, what would come to your mind? I mean, your mind's probably racing now. No, it wasn't shag carpet that I grew up on as a kid, but it was the red dot, the TEDx stage, TEDx Bear Creek Park, February 29, 2020. And this man came out on stage first. And in fact, when I was getting ready to do my TED Talk, I was honored when they said, you can be the number 2. And that didn't mean I was in the lineup, the number 2 talk in terms of quality. It just happened that way. And then I read your Peter's bio and I went, holy crap. How did I get to be number 2 behind this guy? So I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about Peter. He's humble, but a bit more about his background. He is a futurist. If you don't know what that is, I'm sure he'll talk to us about it. An author as well. He's written a great book called Crisis of Control: How Artificial Superintelligences May Destroy or Save the Human Race. What? He is a technology expert. He's got a master's degree from Cambridge. But what was even more fascinating was all this work I saw about NASA, a Jet Propulsion Lab, and a parallel career in business coaching. I mean, how does a NASA guy coach in business? It's all too weird. And yes, it fits the moniker of nerd turned brilliant guy. His Next Wave Institute, he has teaches how to thrive through technological disruption. And the TED Talk that he gave, a snippet of that, he actually went to the British parliamentary, the House of Lords. I feel like I should have an ascot on right now. And well, that's the wisdom he has. But we know, Peter, that this is about you and your story. So I want you to take us back as far as you want to go, because we don't just want to talk about your successes, but the journey, anything at all. Start us, back to that nerdy point. You came into this world born golden, and tell us how you went to where you are.
Well, meeting on the TEDx stage is just about the most unlikely thing in my life. 15, 20 years ago, that would have looked like fantasy. Because in high school, I was the guy whose teacher said gave the worst talk he'd ever heard. It was 10 years before I tried doing that again. And yet I started thinking about and looking into artificial intelligence about 8 years ago. And it was rather a theoretical thing at that point, but I had children. My first child was 2 at the time, and then a couple of years later, I had another one. So we've got 2 daughters now, and they are 10 and 6. And I had this moment. It actually came down to a moment. I was out jogging on a trail that goes by the house, and I started talking to myself, because that's one of the things nerds do. And I said, do you believe the things that you've been saying and thinking about artificial intelligence and where we might go in the future and the risks that has, as well as its benefits? And then I answered this voice. I know this is getting pretty psychologically questionable here, but that's how it went. And I said, yes, I do. And the voice said, no, really, 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 do you believe that? And I thought about it, and I said, yes, I do. I think that we really do have to become more conscious to manage that risk. And then the voice said, well, what does that mean for our daughter's future? And that was a wake-up moment. And then it showed me this vision of the future where things didn't work out, where things went bad. And it showed my daughters. I saw them turn around to me and say, you mean you knew this was going to happen? Why didn't you do something?
Wow. I mean, talk about a compelling comment from a 10 or a 6-year-old. And so first of all, I want to honor you to share. I mean, coming on a radio show and sharing the intimate parts of your story, that's just, in my opinion, that's being a hero. That's why we call it the hero's journey. I almost look at an inflection point, Peter. There's a lot to be said about mental health and jogging and releasing the chemicals in the brain. And, there you were in that trail, and you had this, I call it an epiphany or an idea. But I want to say that and get your comment that there's a lot of people who have these ideas, but many of them don't do anything with it. They don't answer what's called the call to adventure and go on this journey, as Campbell calls it, to seek and learn and come back as a shaman and a guide. When I saw your TED Talk on AI, you actually brought me back in a time. I didn't tell you this before, but my father, my dad passed away January 2018, and my TED Talk honored him because he was part of my life. But I remember when I was a kid, I don't know, this is bizarre, but I was growing up in my teens. My home wasn't that great, but my dad was still there at that time. He was a teacher. He taught the electrical trades at British Columbia Institute of Technology. And he came home one day and he started talking about this thing called AI. And it was just really in its infancy stages. And I guess he was around this body of educators, and he started telling me stuff. And I was trying to jog my memory about what the heck at that time he was saying. But flash forward now, here we are, and AI is a part of life. And here you are, giving your commitment to really, I think, which is a big cause of helping people understand that. I want to just read something out of your bio and get you to comment. It said that when I had children, I realized the peril their future was in, and that I had the communication skills to make a difference. I resolved to bring the worlds of technology and human development together to solve this. Just tell us what that means.
Well, at the time that I had that vision, as a parent, you've got to answer that. So I said, okay, I'm in. What do I do? And the voice came back, said, you can communicate to people so that they will listen. And that's when I said, well, you've got the wrong person. Have you seen me speak? You've got to be joking. Anything but that. But it didn't let up. And after I got on that journey, after I committed, I started seeing the pieces of the puzzle, because I had for some years been pursuing things outside of the world of science, outside of space and computers. I'd been doing development on myself. I'd been learning to coach and become certified in that, and fields like neurolinguistic programming. And I realized I could actually speak to a wide variety of groups and be credible to everyone from a business person to a computer scientist, that I just had to learn those skills. So that took about a decade of communication practice.
Yeah.
And that was part of the journey. That was the thing that had to be brought forth. And well, you and I have same speaking coach for TEDx, and you'll appreciate this. First time I walked into her house with a talk that was for something else, and asked for her coaching, and she had read it, and she looked at me and she said, "We should have started 6 months ago. I do not have time to be nice."
Well, I got to tell you that I think my lines went something like "You're boring and you're stoic," and it was a little broader than that. And that was the first time anybody in my life had actually told me that I wasn't being the authentic me, and I had to find that. I love your story. I love you and your story here. I want to dig more into a couple of things you said, and then we'll get into something that fascinates me is the AI topic and futurism, just so we can help the audience. We want to have some teaching moments on the show today. Just quickly, what age were you when that teacher said it was the worst talk they ever heard? How old were you?
15.
Yeah, okay. Well, I did a lot of talk on this through my own journey of mental health and learning how cognitive behavior works. And for the audience, cognition is your thoughts, behavior is how your thoughts behave. And unlike plants and animals, we are the only species who can change our thoughts, replace them with others. And I learned that. But thing is, Peter, is what I looked at in the mirror and what comes back in me, and I still struggle with this, is not who I am. And I said this to my TED coach when I started taping and rehearsing for TED. I would use Zoom video conferencing, and when I saw myself, I would get paralyzed. And what I saw is this ugly guy. This guy's not good enough, and I didn't realize that that's a thinking pattern that was wired in my unconscious brain. And so a lot of leaders come on my show, and that's the most successful people in the world. They always seem to find that one chip on their shoulder, that one thing that somebody said that drives them. Sadly, not everybody like you and I can use that thing and use it and weaponize it. Many people go into depression or they don't fulfill their life and who they are. What I learned, and I'll finish with this, is the prefrontal cortex part of the brain, which causes you to pause and analyze your thoughts, which I know you know this. I didn't know that it doesn't develop until age 20. So everything we're told when we're younger, the brain just stores and says it's what you are. And that's really where my wiring of, not good enough. And so that teacher, probably in my books now, is one of the worst teachers on the planet because their job is to nurture and develop. So I want to give you a lot of credit for taking that and turning it into something. I think you inspire me and people more because of that part of your story, because there's many millions of children and youth coming up who unfortunately things were said to them for no fault of their own. Want to ask you just quickly to tell us about Asperger's. What exactly is that?
It's on the autism spectrum. It's at one end of it. If you've seen Big Bang Theory or been to a science fiction convention, then you know what I'm talking about. So it has aspects of, for me, it takes an act of will to look at someone's eyes while I'm talking. They just want to slide off, and it's not anything to do with how I relate to that person. That's just how my brain is wired.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you explaining that. I understand. I understand what that is. Let me ask you about the TED. I know you and I were down in the green room, and I just remember that you said something to me, which kind of was fascinating. You said that you don't eat for 2 days or something leading up to your TED Talk. And I thought, that's interesting. You don't eat for 2 days. And then I saw you doing some exercises and probably some self-work. With what you manage with your health, your mental health and things like Asperger's, do you have something you do before you do your speaking? Or what are your biggest fears, challenges, and how do you overcome that before you stand in front of the public?
I have some experiences that help me. This actually relates to where people are at the moment. I think it's impressive that people are listening to this talk at a time when so many of us are thrown into survival, and that people have the cognitive headroom to embrace and engage with something beyond that at the moment, I think speaks to a lot of capability. I am, as you heard in my introduction, at TEDx, certified in scuba diving and skydiving. And those are two sports where you have a significant chance that you might suddenly be faced with the prospect of imminent death. Not put anyone off that, but it's something you have to train for, because if you panic, you will shred your chances of survival.
Mm.
And actually, on my very first skydive, I was faced with a situation where I thought I had to cut away to my reserve chute. And this was not a tandem jump. This was before they were using radios. So I was on my own 3,500 feet in the air, and I had to make that decision. So since then, I've learned to not panic. And there's a lot of people listening to us right now who are responsible for businesses that have people depending on them to have all their resources available and not sacrifice any of those to panic. And I found that I could take what I'd learned in those situations and use it in a situation like speaking in public, because 15 years ago, easily, the idea of doing a TEDx would have been panic territory. I had two very good reasons why. Number one, I can't remember my lines, and number two, I can't be interesting. All of these perfect reasons, and yet I said I can keep going until I reach a stopping point, and so far that stopping point is beyond that red dot. So I don't know where it is.
I think we've crossed paths for a reason. This is fascinating. I got to tell you that when you start talking about things like scuba diver, skydiver, I mean, dude, you're talking about your limitations. I mean, come on. I don't know too many people who jump out of a plane and scuba dive. So you're on my, I want to be like that guy list. And, I have a friend actually, when I was chair of a board for a mental health organization, he was the executive director, and he jumped out of a plane and stopped for a while. I said, what happened? He said, well, I landed and I broke my ankle. And I'm going you're back at it again. I mean, there's a certain DNA. I think there's a certain rush also that comes with challenging and looking your fears squarely in the eye, looking down that barrel of the shotgun, standing at a TED Talk stage when you're dealing with those past little voices. I think there's something just brilliant about that. It keeps us going forward. And I think everybody here, it's a teaching moment. If you listen to what Peter said with his backstory, he's a very intelligent, brave, and talented man. But the things he said earlier in the backstory are the story that plays in his mind, and he has developed resilience. So, whatever you're doing, if you're set back in your life, if you feel you can't stand on a stage because somebody said you can't speak, listen to Peter talk, because all you need is within you now, and we were born golden to be able to do anything we want. Unfortunately, what we were told is just not true. Peter, I want to do something kind of fun here because we're at a couple minutes to wrap. This is going so well. I want to have you back again. So I'm going to ask you to we're the second part of the interview. I want to talk about AI and what futurism is. But you did this little trip down to the House of Lords. In 1 minute, tell us what the experience was like to step into the British Parliament.
Well, of course, it's ancient, and it's oozing with history and culture and the weight of government. And they're very friendly in that committee, though. It was a very informal kind of atmosphere of, we want to understand about AI. We're inviting people to come tell us about it, each one with some expertise in some niche. And it was a real think tank of ideas and information. These are probably the best informed legislators in the world on artificial intelligence, simply by virtue of how many people they've invited to tell them about it.
That's amazing. I already have this vision in my mind. Everybody, we're gonna hit the pause button, Peter, and we're gonna have you come back. So everybody, find this show on your favorite podcast channel. Give it a high rating to honor Peter's work. Share it around, and come on back, because we're gonna talk about artificial intelligence and a bunch of other stuff. Peter's book and whatever he comes to our mind. So just stand by. And by the way, live with passion. Find your true purpose. Live the life you deserve and desire, like you hear from Peter.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca